so dangerous, like to think that, just because we're all black, women and things like that, we have this same type of ideology and what
Other people are not ready to have the conversations that need to be had in a
Mhm.
logical manner without trying to attack the person for what they believe. And, so it's just so many, like, because of their political affiliation, you can almost immediately tell where their level of faith is. Y'all don't have the type of faith that I have. So it's like, we can't even have a conversation on the same level because I'm talking from this values perspective on faith, and you're coming from
I feel like a
feeling.
lot of times what comes from the liberal side is being so anxious to speak about things and not having a full knowledge and revelation about, like we grab a
Like
headline, anything that is done, from the White House perspective, I may not completely align with.
Right.
Some things I may not agree with, I may question. I feel like that's normal and natural to have, those questions, or what have you. You shouldn't blindly follow anybody except for Jesus.
We call public with this right now. Like a city on a hilltop.
It's so dangerous, like to think that, just because we're all black, women and things like that, we have this same type of ideology and what happens when somebody challenges, what you think or what they feel like you should automatically default to.
Right. Yeah, and I just don't think that, of course, when you're in your own mindset, it's very rare that you think about how other people may feel who are on the other side. And so it's like people are having conversations, they're making assumptions, and they don't realize how much we have to navigate these spaces that I don't agree with you, but because it's like one against many, it's not a safe place or a safe bet to even bring up any conversation, more so because you are not ready, other people are not ready to have the conversations that need to be had in a logical manner without trying to attack the person for what they believe. And so it's just so many levels to it, and I'm just like, I was so thankful to have, even though I haven't been that much engaged in social media, I have had two pretty good conversations. One with the coworker who I found out was conservative, which I was like, we were both like, what? So it's an older white lady, she's like 57. And we was in the office, it was just us, and we ended up somehow, I don't know how, but somehow having a conversation about politics. And I think I made a comment, and she was like, Jessica, you don't know how relieved I am to find that there is somebody in this office who thinks and feels the way that I do about, like, their faith and all these perspectives. And what we boiled down the conversation to was, it has been very evident over the last few months, people who have a certain level of faith, like, because of their political affiliation, you can almost immediately tell where their level of faith is, because we were both talking about, like, just our value systems. If you have a certain level of faith, your values aren't going to align with certain things. And even if you, let's say, agree with a certain a party originally, you would at least challenge the things that you have issue with instead of just like wholeheartedly agreeing with everything. So that was a really good and conversation just to know, and we can kind of have that connection. And then on my way to Utah the other week, the
Girl,
person,
Utah, what you doing out in
girl,
Utah?
Utah, we're gonna talk about Utah because Utah was good. But the guy I was sitting next to, he lives in Oklahoma City. We flew out of Oklahoma City, and we ended up having a conversation. I don't even know how we got on the topic, and we mentioned politics because I told him I was from Atlanta. I said it's a little bit too liberal for me, if you ask me. And so and I said moving to Tulsa, I said surprisingly it's very liberal, more so than I would have assumed. And he was saying how OKC was more so conservative, and so then he was like, well, he kind of, and I like the way he kind of asked me, like, well, what level are you on with that?
Yeah.
And I was like, conservative. And so from that point forward, we was able to have conversations, and again, it came back to faith. Every single conversation that I'm having and reflecting on is coming back to a faith. And that's the conversation that you can have with conservatives. If I have a conversation with a liberal, unfortunately, it's almost like it drains me so much because y'all don't have the type of faith that I have. So it's like we can't even have a conversation on the same level because I'm talking from this values perspective on faith, and you're coming from feelings, and they do not match anytime. So I've been just trying to balance these conversations and just people saying different things. You on the phone with somebody and they want to mention something about the executive orders. If y'all talk to me one more time about an executive order that needs to be done, and I'm not trying to get all into it,
Yeah.
So it's navigating that. I'm thankful for what's happening, but feeling it is it's been much a lot.
Yeah. And I'm learning to just like hold my peace in certain situations. And I feel like it's okay because I feel like a lot of times what comes from the liberal side is being so anxious to speak about things and not having a full knowledge and revelation about, like we grab a headline. And I've been guilty of that, especially like in the past of like seeing something that's been sensationalized or what have you, and not having a full understanding of what it means. Um, and then it's like running with that, but not really understanding like what it means. And we could take like DEI, for example. If you
Mhm.
look at it, like what the research shows, the biggest beneficiary of DEI movements has been white women. You know what I mean? But
Right.
so it's like we fight for these things with a righteous indignation because we hold our culture and our not religion, we hold our race above like kingdom, and it's very damaging, and a lot of times it's just not even based on facts.
Right.
So I'm learning to be okay with not having all the answers, stepping back when I need to actually like look up policies and have a little bit more knowledge and insight, because I mean, of course, like everything that is done from the White House perspective, I may not completely align with.
Right.
Some things I may not agree with, I may question. I feel like that's normal and natural to have those questions, or what have you. You shouldn't blindly follow anybody except for Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But and even with that, like he welcomes our questions, so that's not even like it's a decision. If we're following the model of Christ, like we have the autonomy to choose him, choose who we serve. So I think in alignment with that, what we see unfortunately a lot of times on the other side is like people just basically wanting you to blindly, like, literally, it's so funny because I would see like interviews, especially like during the elections and stuff like that, when people ask them, oh, why are you voting for them? What policies, what have they done?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. You're literally just voting because they're Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
How crazy is that? How dangerous is that, to
Yeah.
just blindly pick something because that is the way that it has always been? And
Yes.
so, yeah.
Yeah. And then I think to on top of all of that, it's like to really see how this plays out when it comes to like these churches, and how they sort of like preach and spew certain ideologies. And it's
Mhm.
just like, for people like you saying, taking a headline and kind of like going with it, the churches would like doing the same thing. You taking a headline, you developing a policy, you putting out a whole boycott, preaching to people as though this is truth. Meanwhile, none of them are actually looking at or reflecting on the real, truth behind what's being done and how they're being like just manipulated. And I'm just like, this stuff is mind boggling. But to your point, it's definitely a process of having to navigate. What am I going to respond to? What am I going to listen to? What do I want to be around? What can I use to distract me? What can I use to fill me back up? Because people, I mean, they just out here yelling.
Mhm.
I don't know if you heard some of the reflections from like Jamal Bryant's recent sermon.
You don't know. I refuse. Like,
So this person did like was it like you know how they like show a clip or whatever and do like a reaction video
okay.
to this. So I watched this podcast called Standing the Truth, and she actually lives in Atlanta and went to New Birth before Jamal Bryant was there and stuff. So she did his reaction video to this. This man used the story of the blind man who was on the road that called out to Jesus, and he used that as far as the man yelling to Jesus, to say that we need to yell to communicate our point until somebody listens. Now, these Democrats is on TV just yelling, 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 and nobody is listening because it's not logical. And y'all think that yelling is going to help make somebody listen to you. And so it's just like, I'm just,
You have to laugh to keep from crying sometimes.
you really do. You really do. So yeah, politics is something else. And know who we are. This is time, and it's ours. Let's take the night by storm. We'll make the streets our own. Let's take